ecological footprint quiz. Let's start. In the United States.
How big is the city or town where you live? Like 10,000 to 100,000? Okay, what city has the most similar weather?
Denver?
Denver? Yeah. How much of the food that you eat is processed or packaged and not locally grown?
Half.
Which housing type best describes your home?
I live in a house that has running water.
And I do have electricity.
Yes. How many miles per gallon does your car get?
Mine probably gets 15 to 25. And how often do you drive in a car with someone else rather than alone?
Almost always. Oh my gosh.
Okay, total footprint 22. If everyone lived like you, we would need 5.1 planets.
Baby, you're making me hot, like it or not. When you come to see me, I get steamy, baby. You're raising my temperature. It's not your intention, I'm sure, but it's the fact of the matter. Ooh, turn up the sun in here. Oh, you tell me, dear. Ooh, turn up the sun in here. Oh, won't you tell me?
Sweetheart, what can I say? Since you've come to stay, all of my springs have become summers. Sweetheart, I cannot cool down since you've come around. I'm yearning, I'm burning from kilt to crown.
Ooh, turn up the sun in here. Oh, won't you tell me, dear? Ooh, turn up the sun in here. Oh, won't you tell me? Darling, you caused a heat wave. I'm getting hotter each day. Oh, my mercury's rising, it's surprising.
Honey, I can't blame it on you. I think it's something we do. We're making hot weather together.
Ooh, turn up the sun in here. Oh, won't you tell me, dear? Ooh, turn up the sun in here. Oh, won't you tell me?
I've been doing weather here in Missoula for 8 years now, coming here to the Missoula area in 1999. Whenever we talk about the normal high and low for the dates, such as March 28th, the normal is 52 for a high, 29 for the low. Now that's based on a 30-year average from 1970 to the year 2000. Interestingly enough, when I first arrived here in the late 90s, the average was based on the 30-year period 1960 to 1990, and at that time, the average high was 51 and the average low 27. So the change from the one 30-year period to the current 30-year period, we've seen a warming of 1 degree for the average high and a warming of 2 degrees for the average low. 1 or 2 degrees doesn't seem like a lot, but in a 30-year period norm, that is really a significant factor.
Initially, when the concept of global warming was put forward, along with all of the very, very dire consequences, it was, I think, rather scary to people.
I don't want to believe global warming happens, and I've been there, but it doesn't make it any less true. And as we look at science and the scientific proof we're getting, it's pretty indisputable. Sad to say, but global warming is here.
What I want to do today is really focus on just purely the scientific facts. I just want to give one quick reminder of the difference between weather and climate. Weather is the meteorology that occurs day in and day out. Today it's, 8 degrees outside today here in Missoula. That's the weather. Climate is when we look at trends in weather that are occurring over decades to even centuries. And so it doesn't really matter what any given day's meteorology is to climate. If it was 20 below zero today, that would tell me nothing about the climate of Missoula. You only learn climate by stretching through decades and longer of looking at weather records and looking for trends of those weather records.
There hasn't been too much rain.
It seems to get hotter.
Hot summers.
Really hot in the summer. And it seemed like when we were younger that it never got up much over 90. But now it's 101, 105, and that's kind of hard, especially on older people.
It seems mild to us. We have bits of cold weather that come in, and I'm not sure why or what's causing that, but I don't feel like we've really had a winter.
The snowpack in the mountains isn't as great. If it was, then we wouldn't have reservoirs that were low on water. The locals around here talk about that this particular area where we're standing typically could have 20 feet of snow or more sitting in this little valley here. So I haven't seen that yet. I guess it makes you wonder what is going on.
Now the climate change issue was predicted back in 1896 when early scientists put together the concept when they first started learning about some atmospheric chemistry effects, and they postulated over 100 years ago that CO2 is going to increase in the atmosphere because of human activity. And when it does, the greenhouse effect, the differential transmission of long and shortwave radiation is going to cause the Earth to warm up. CO2 and other greenhouse molecules act like a window in that shortwave radiation, visible light, can go through the window, but when it is absorbed and re-emitted as long-wave thermal radiation, it can't come back out because the wavelength of the energy is changed a lot, and the longer wavelength energy cannot pass through the glass, whereas the shorter wavelength light could.
Our ability in the world today to destroy is outpacing our willingness to create and to sustain.
Global warming is changing the world in ways that we barely comprehend, and at a speed which is absolutely incredible in terms of the types of evolutionary changes or climate changes that we have seen in the past.
Wildlife can adapt to climate change, but what we're seeing with human-induced climate change and global warming is an enormous rise in temperatures in a very, very compressed time.
The great majority of scientific effort has indicated that we are going to continue to have higher temperatures as the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere increases. And there's no question about that. We measure accurately the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, something that is influenced by mankind through his fossil burning.
The climate trends that we're seeing now, the greenhouse effect that we're measuring now, are based on really two facts. One is how humans are changing the land cover of the Earth. You can see that the land cover trajectory is measurable but pretty small. By far, where the greenhouse effect is coming from is combustion of fossil fuels. Every time we burn a fossil fuel for energy, that combustion releases CO2 as as a waste gas. And a little bit of CO2 is not harmful at all. We actually use CO2 in greenhouses to get plants to grow faster. It's when that CO2 stays in the atmosphere and provides the greenhouse warming that we're going to talk about that it gets to be an issue for society.
This is not a political issue. This is a scientific issue, and it is a moral issue. I think we have to try to save our Earth. There are those people who say it's already too late. The activities of humankind have already damaged our climate to the point where there's no return, and civilization will change in a drastic and dramatic way. And I think that we have to try to turn that around, to do what we can to reduce global warming.
Stewardship of the Earth isn't just an option, it's an imperative. It's about communal survival.
There's one graph that started our modern understanding of the greenhouse effect and climate change, and this is it. The Mauna Loa atmospheric CO2 curve. Within 5 years, they saw a couple of things. The first thing they saw was every darn year, the atmospheric CO2 is going up. And when you recognize that this station is in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, it's as close to a measure of the background atmosphere as you're going to get. This is not downwind of some big city. This also tells us something about how strong the biosphere is. The photosynthetic activity of the biosphere is what draws this down a couple of parts per million every summer, and then it recovers back to the higher CO2 in the wintertime as respiration gives off CO2 from our ecosystems. It was absolutely the very first indication we had that humans were capable of a global impact.
You begin to not be able to deny what is going on. We have pine beetle infestations. We have spruce budworm last year that infected all the trees that weren't infected with the pine beetle. We're seeing a lot of changes just in the time that we've been here. So you can't deny anymore that our activities are very impactful, and yet you feel totally connected to a system that is not sustainable, that is fossil fuel based. So how can we begin to extract ourselves from that and create a lifestyle that makes sense and that is for the long term?
We are already beginning to see many species of wildlife adapt to climate change. We are seeing bird species nest at earlier times in the year. We're seeing animals starting to move their range north. Whether that adaptation can continue at the rate at which global warming is occurring is something that is being studied and pondered by some of the best biologists in the world.
We learned with Mount St. Helens eruption that the atmosphere goes around the entire Earth in about 10 days. The heat capacity of the atmosphere is really pretty small. The ocean, and this one study in Science is where I figured it out, the ocean had 90% of the heat capacity of the climate system. When we want to understand climate trends, one of the things that we have to do first is go study the oceans. And they now realize that the oceans have this big, long, slow-moving conveyor belt that slowly mixes and overturns the ocean. One guesstimate is that it might take 1,000 years for the ocean to completely circulate around the planet. It is where the memory of our Earth climate system comes from, much more than the atmosphere.
We're very dependent on energy. We're the largest city nearest the Williston Oil Basin. We're the largest city near some of the largest coal resources in the world. We have 3 oil refineries in our county.
We have 90 GE wind turbines, 1.5 megawatts each. Just one of these wind turbines is equivalent to planting 1,000 acres of forest in terms of CO2 reduction. So we're covering about 90,000 acres of forest with these turbines. Oh, this is as clean as it can get, I guess, as far as I know. There's no emissions at all. Your fuel source is free. It's creating jobs. We employ 12 full-time people out here. Might not be a big deal to bigger towns, but towns like Harleton, Jews Gap, it's a pretty big deal.
The wind generator and then the small solar panel were the first that were installed here. And that ran around $10,000. And I think it was about a year or two later that this one here was added on. Wind generator generates about 900 watts. And this one here is about the same. And the other is 570 watts. That's the maximum when there's a real good sun and a good windy day.
It takes quite a while for these things to pay for themselves, but when you go through generations, your grandkids are really going to have a good deal for themselves.
In every single ocean around the entire planet, the water temperature's warmed up on the order of a couple of tenths of a degree to as high as about a half a degree. That doesn't sound like a lot, but remember the huge heat capacity that water has. And you remember that the planet is 3/4 ocean, and they're really deep. And so we're talking about a stunning amount of energy has gone into the oceans.
We are constrained by time, money, energy, our ability to change and adapt, and in an economy that is largely based on models that come with fossil fuel attached.
My specialty is getting people in the bus, getting people out of cars, reducing pollutants, and trying to get back to where we were 200 years ago with considerably cleaner air. Last July, we put into service 5 new 35-foot Gillig transit buses that were designed to run on biodiesel. At the same time, we converted the rest of our fleet to biodiesel, and right now our entire fleet all operate on B20, which is a blend of 20% bio and 80% fossil diesel. You would think the traffic would drive people to use the bus, but unfortunately, you have to get from one side of the street to the other. You could get on the bus to go to work in the morning, but when you got home, you had to cross the street to get to your house, and you were taking your life in your hands. That's what doesn't work.
It's not as easy for people to conceive of things that might help us 50 years from now when they're living from paycheck to paycheck as it is. We've established a network of bike trails, but unfortunately they don't all connect yet. I'm really anxious for the day when all our trails do connect and people are motivated to use alternate transportation in their own power to get to work. Right now, you take your life in your hands on some of the streets because they're really busy and they're going 45 miles an hour.
Let's make the roads, the community, walkable and bikeable so that people who want to choose these things can. That is a tragedy if people want to do these things but they don't feel safe or don't have the access to do it.
Orange Street right here has a pretty nice bike lane, but you can see exactly where it ends. And this is where it becomes fairly dangerous for a cyclist. Vehicles will honk and sometimes literally run you off the road. It doesn't take too many of those incidences to make you feel unsafe. We could repaint this road and have a 4-foot bike lane on each edge. A little creativity, a little paint, a little planning, and we can recreate our cities not for too big of an expense.
Now, one of the things that higher ocean temperatures is causing is sea level rise. Two things cause the sea level to go up. One is warmer water expands. So purely from the thermal heating of the ocean, the water's expanding a bit. The other is, of course, glacial melt off the polar ice caps and the Greenland ice caps. Whenever we have terrestrial glaciers melting into the ocean, that's rising the sea levels. The Arctic Ocean goes all the way across the North Pole. So the North Pole is actually water, whereas the South Pole's on Antarctica on land. The Arctic Ocean has had a sea ice cover that lasts all through the summertime. What we're seeing now is a progressive melting of the summertime melting of the polar ice cap. And we've had a decrease in the northern hemisphere sea ice of 25,000 square kilometers per year. We've actually lost 1 million square kilometers of sea ice in the last 30 years. They project within about 50 years that the Arctic Ocean could be ice-free entirely in the summertime. What that means to ocean currents and how those ocean currents then impact land weather is really pretty amazing to think about, because where you've had an ice cap across the entire top of the planet for eons, now we're going to have an open water ocean up there, and it's going to change the ocean currents undoubtedly.
The city of Missoula has committed to the purchase of fuel-efficient or hybrid vehicles or alternative fuel vehicles.
The driver's the biggest factor in the mileage. They're rated at 50 on the highway and 60 in the city. The city driving gets better mileage because of the stop and go. Every time you slow down or stop, you turn the motor into a generator, puts energy back in the battery to reuse later. And that's where the real savings comes in with a hybrid, is you're not wasting that energy through the brakes, turning it into heat and dust on the road. You get to bottle it back up and reuse it.
The gas engine typically shuts off at intersections when you stop, so it took me a while to figure out that I wasn't stalling every time. I think the tank is roughly 9 gallons, and I don't visit gas stations very often in the car.
The Zen car, Zen standing for zero emissions, no noise. It's rated by the EPA at 245 miles to the gallon, even though it doesn't use gas. So the EPA has done an equivalency to equate the energy usage, the kilowatt hours. The motor doesn't idle, there is no sound to the motor, and when you go, it starts. When you stop, it's not doing anything, it's stationary. So there's no combustion, there's no tailpipe emissions. The greatest benefit, though, really is the feeling that you're doing something. You're driving a vehicle of the future, and there's something very satisfying in doing that.
Climatologists really like to look at cryosphere, at snow and ice, because it's very easy to see. It's easy to see with even very cheap satellites. Basically, white versus brown is pretty easy to detect. So we've got lots of information, including right here in Glacier National Park. You don't need any training at all to be able to see the difference in the snow coverage and ice coverage of these glaciers. It appears Glacier Park will be completely glacier-free in about 30 years. Everywhere we look at glaciers, 95% of the glaciers on Earth are retreating. There's 5% that a few advancing, a few holding still, but the vast, vast majority are all retreating, and at accelerating rates also.
I have been at Mini Glacier continuously since 1976, so that puts it out actually over 30 years. I've lived there with my family. My kids have grown up there. I have seen glacial recession in Glacier Park, and particularly with Grinnell Glacier. The foot of the glacier has receded, a couple of hundred yards. And I particularly notice the increase in size in what we used to call the meltwater pond, which was beneath the toe of the glacier, and it is like its own small tarn or lake at this point. Years ago, we had a cache of rescue climbing equipment in a small aluminum box, which was placed relatively near the toe of the glacier. That rescue cache is no longer stocked because it is so many yards removed from the toe of the glacier that it's essentially unusable.
Some of our higher elevation colder climatic species like lynx, like mountain goats, may well disappear from the Montana landscape. Grizzly bears and bears that hibernate may no longer do so if there isn't a winter season to compel them into hibernation. If indeed it's a wetter and hotter climate where winters are milder, some of our big game populations may prove remarkably resilient and even increase under those kind of conditions. I think perhaps the biggest threat is to Montana's cold water fisheries, where we're going to see a reduced stream flows, we're going to see hotter temperatures in our streams for longer periods of time, and some of our prize trout fisheries probably won't exist in 30 or 50 years. We may well see bass fisheries where now we're catching brown trout, and that will be a real change for Montana.
In 1956, we established a network of observers, more than 100 people, who were willing to observe when the lilac began to bloom in different parts of Montana. We found that over several decades of our study, the bloom has been coming earlier at the rate of about 2 days earlier per decade. The other part of the study had to do with the first pulse of the stream flow coming out of the mountains. When it gets warm in the spring, the first impulse of the melting snow is recorded, and in analyzing that data, we found that the first pulse of the spring melt has been coming earlier at the rate of about 2 days per decade.
There's a big emphasis now in this country and looking at the potential of agricultural soils to sequester carbon. You know, we think of human activities as producing CO2. Well, some human activities could also sequester carbon. Traditionally, agriculture in the northern Great Plains has involved intensive tillage practices, and now the movement in agriculture is towards reduced and no-till systems which involve less soil disturbance. And soil disturbances are bad in terms of carbon balances because they tend to promote the release of carbon dioxide from soils. So our interest is in what impact these practices, these things like no-till, continuous cropping, what impact do they have on other greenhouse gases? And the chief one that we're looking at is nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide is only found in trace amounts in the atmosphere, but is reported to be about 300 times more powerful a greenhouse gas on a per molecule basis than is CO2.
In temperate zone forestry, we can say that we've had a positive benefit up to this point of greater forest growth and longer growing seasons. The flip side of that coin, though, is we're paying the price for that longer growing season in more wildfire activity. We now have some very clear evidence that in the western U.S. over the last 30 to 35 years, the snowpack is melting earlier. The fire season is now 70 days longer, over 2 months longer of active burning wildfires than we had in 1970. And the other thing that became very clear is because the snow's melting earlier, mid-elevation spruce fir forests that are just packed full of fuel are now drying out enough to burn, and they didn't used to.
A lot of what we can do to combat global warming are things that our grandparents and our great-grandparents already did. I'm always amazed when I look at construction in Montana at the way our grandparents built and where they built. Just take where they sited their building. Nobody built up on the ridges because you couldn't heat your house or it wasn't an appropriate place to build and be efficient with your resources. The utility bills, water and energy in particular, are never going to go down.
The office for my organization, Sustainable Obtainable Solutions, is in an old miner's cabin in Helena, Montana. And it's in a community of miners' cabins that were built together as a neighborhood. It's right next to downtown. They already had some of the solutions to global warming in hand. And I think if we look back in civilizations through time, we find that this was one of the solutions to ease, convenience, and efficiency in one's life, and saving energy. Be together, be close, be a community.
I think anytime that we talk about land use and development, global warming is almost automatically a piece of that conversation. As we talk about residential and commercial density, the denser we are, the less impact I think we have on our local and really the global environment and global climate. The closer you are to the stuff you need, the less chance that you're going to get in the car every time. It really starts with the block. A city block in Missoula, Montana is not terribly long, which means you have lots of intersections. You have a street that works for the cars because it provides not only a corridor, but it provides a place for those cars to park conveniently. The conveniently parked cars abut a boulevard sidewalk. So you have folks who are walking on a sidewalk on a grid that makes sense. And you're near houses that address the public space. You're looking at front porches and front doors and windows, so you have a sense that you're part of a community, you're part of a space, and that there are people paying attention, which isn't a bad thing in terms of sort of public behavior and a sense of safety and really a sense of belonging in many cases.
Now let's look at some Montana numbers specifically. This is just the annual mean air temperature for Great Falls, Missoula, Billings, Bozeman, Kalispell. Every one of these over the last 50 years, with the exception of Great Falls, each of these cities have had an increase in annual average temperature of about a degree Fahrenheit. What's more remarkable, and we look at this to specifically look at this significance of the early spring snowmelt, look at how much March is warmer. 7.7 degrees, 6.2, 5.8, all of these 5 stations, their March temperatures are about 5 degrees warmer than they were 50 years ago. In climatology science, you have trends of a couple of tenths of a degree. You don't have trends of 5 degrees. I mean, this is really just pegs the meter in a way that we don't even know how to react to. Cold temperatures have an ecosystem function that not very many people recognize, and a few good cold snaps per winter are actually needed. Those cold temperatures kill bugs, and we need more 20 and 30 and 50, well, no, maybe not 50 below.
One of the real issues with our current food system in terms of global warming is that the typical piece of food travels between 1,300 and 1,500 miles before it gets to your plate. So added on to the resource cost of the production of the food is the resource cost of the transportation of the food. After you eat it, the energy you get out doesn't come close to approximating the energy it took to grow that food and transport it. We can produce a whole lot of our food. We would need to exercise some political will and rebuild a food processing infrastructure that used to, by 1950, employ half the state and now doesn't exist at all. Right now we ship out raw food commodities and we import in value-added things, and someone else other than people in Montana make the money off of it. Our current food system is tremendously vulnerable. We get most all of our food from far away. That means the reliability of our food rests on 2 very shaky principles. One is international goodwill, and the other one is cheap oil. And we all know that both of these things are not permanent and can change really quickly. If either one of those goes the wrong way, we're in a lot of trouble in terms of where our food comes from. We teach around 100 university students a year about sustainable agriculture. We have a small group of kids, teenagers who are involved in Missoula Drug Court, who come up here and work side by side with the university students in the summertime. And we end up with a little bit of a little community here by the end of the summer. And we bring between 15 and 20,000 pounds of food to our local food bank each year. When you grow food, you see real tangible results from your efforts, and it's very obvious that those tangible results are meaningful as well. And the meaning goes beyond yourself. You're helping feed someone else. And that's a powerful thing. We become producers, growers, customers, as opposed to merely consumers. Food is a medium for becoming part of your community.
The precipitation trends are nowhere as nearly as consistent as the temperature trends. It really is much less related to basic greenhouse gas forcing. By and large, it seems the western half of the state is getting a little bit more precip, and the eastern half is getting a little less. The aspect that I pay the most attention to in terms of these climate trends locally is where our snowpack's going. Snow is absolutely the best free storage you can have for a water supply on a landscape. We see on the order of a 40% decrease in the April 1 snow water equivalent from 1950. 40%. Here's the snowfall graph. The long-term average for Missoula has been about 50 inches. Does everybody remember the winter of '96? We'll probably never see a year like that again. Well, last year we had 19 inches, so it was the second lowest snowfall in history. And based on this trend, it came out to be about 2060 to 2080, that we expect it won't snow here at all. So this is the snowfall trend around the state. Every single one of the 5 stations we look at over the last 50 years has a decreasing snow trend. The smallest decrease is Great Falls, 6 inches lower, and Missoula's the largest with 23 inches less snowfall than 50 years ago.
One of the most impactful things as a nation that we do is build really energy intense homes. So one of the questions that we've been exploring is how can we build our homes with materials that are less impactful. So we've been building straw bale construction homes, and we've been doing cordwood masonry. Cordwood in this part of the country is made up of fir and pine and aspen. In both cases you have walls that are very dense, that have a lot of thermal mass, that are able to absorb the heat of the sun. And you have really highly insulated walls, and you have a construction method that people that don't have a lot of building experience can do. There's a lot of square footage here. About 7,000 square feet of living space. The average home uses about 25 kilowatts of power a day, and we use about 4. So even though we have a lot of square footage for our school, we use a really minimum amount of power. And the way we do that is by orienting the buildings to the south, so we get a lot of light passively from the sun, light and heat, compact fluorescent lighting, really efficient appliances. We have all of the modern conveniences, but we're using current energy. We're using the light of the sun now as opposed to using fossil fuels. It feels good to be tied in to what the sun is doing, what the wind systems are doing.
So we had a little fun and we mapped where the March snow line will be at Snow Bowl in about 50 years. And so here's the present snow line, basically down to the bottom of the valley. Of course, even that you might argue on some years like right now. Well, by 2050, you won't be able to get to the bottom of Grizzly Chute without your hiking boots. Wintertime precip will come as rain. Simple as that. The loss of that water storage as snowpack that just conveniently sits there until the spring and then melts off is really significant. Almost every summer nowadays we're getting to low summer stream flows. Even when we have higher precipitation years. I think there's an awful lot of planning going on around this state that's assuming a stationary climate that's just false. It isn't a stationary climate.
Because our budgets have always been separated, they don't look long-term into operation and maintenance. Like, can we spend and make a building more energy efficient? Building projects like the Bozeman Library are demonstration projects. And what's amazing, if you walk into the library and there's our green board is up there, and people stand and read the green board of the strategies and technologies that we used to make it more efficient. And most people say, well, this isn't rocket science. You know, this isn't anything new.
We recycled 94% of all construction waste that came out of this building. This building is lighted with solar panels to some extent.
Probably it cost us $500,000 extra. If you spread that over a 100-year life of this building, it doesn't seem like a whole lot of investment.
It's, again, a matter of choice, and making a choice that has less environmental impact. So all we have to say is we like recycled things better than we like things that are out of virgin materials.
This is a building materials reuse and recycling center. It's mostly reuse. People donate materials here, and anyone can come and shop here. They get great deals, and we keep all this stuff out of the landfill. My father was a builder and always challenged me to tell him where our houses were going to come from if we stopped cutting down all the trees. It really started me thinking about, okay, how can we live in an economy that has to grow exponentially, and yet we live on a finite planet? 40% of the materials in our landfills come from construction and demolition waste. We take in materials from contractors and homeowners. Anyone who remodels can donate their old materials here, and we turn around and resell it. So it not only conserves resources and keeps stuff out of the landfill, it provides a source of very affordable building materials. At the end of the year, we calculate all of this and add it all up, and we determined that we reused just under 400 tons of building materials last year. That translates to 42 tons of coal, enough energy to power a home for 6 years, enough energy to drive a car for 13 years, and about 60 tons of CO2. An incredibly important part of global warming is having healthy forests and carbon sequestration. You know, in answer to my dad's question there about where our house is going to come from, well, we are going to have to cut some trees, but it is a renewable resource if we use it wisely, and that's what sustainable forestry is all about. One of the main criteria for sustainably harvested lumber in our book is that it's locally harvested and locally milled. So everything comes from western Montana. It goes through 2 mills, one in Seeley Lake and one in St. Regis.
There's no reason to believe that these trends will slow down. We think we'll be lucky if they stay at the rate they are, because everything we know about CO2 production is it's accelerating.
They take these deep ice cores and they can actually measure the atmospheric concentration of trace gases. We are really entering a remarkable period in our climate history that is really pushing us into a dangerous and unknown territory. We have to remember that this is the only planet that we have. There's really one human family, and we have a common future that we have to develop together. The gases that are emitted here travel around the world in a very short time, and we all share the same atmosphere. We're all going to have to come together to address this grave challenge to humanity.
Every one of us can contribute to reducing our impact on the planet.
I go to Big Sky High School, and there are a lot of issues that everyone knows needs to be addressed. We're working on a project right now to increase recycling in my school, and we're just promoting and encouraging people to use these brand new recycle bins that we painted and set all around the school. And there are recycling bins in each classroom, but the people are out in the hallway, and so we put them in the hallway and they're getting used quite often. At the end of class or after school, we are turning down all the teachers' thermostats to a comfortable temperature of approximately 60 degrees. Also, there are a lot of computers left on overnight, so we work on turning those off. We thought of the acronym Kyoto, and it stands for Kind Yellow Octopuses Take Over, and the yellow octopus is sort of our mascot.
I think people can get overwhelmed. What can I do? Well, instead of driving 1 mile to the store or 2 miles to work, how about dusting that bike off? You'll get exercise, you save money, but you'll also reduce a huge load of carbon dioxide getting pumped into the atmosphere.
But it's our dream, and I don't think we'll ever let go of it until we see it happen, that through writing our grants and stuff, we would like to provide wind generators and solar panels for maybe at least 10 families.
I think anything you can produce, whether it's wind or any other form of energy, if you can produce it here at home, you've eliminated a potential reason for conflict in the future.
People respond to their constituents. If there's one thing that I've noticed, because we get piles of messages either through email or phone from people that are concerned about specific issues, the more you get on a specific subject, the more you start to respond to it as a priority from your district. See how people voted. In this state, every person makes a difference and their voice is heard.
When it comes to global warming, I think what we need to deal with more than anything is solutions to the problem. And I'm a family farmer, burn a lot of diesel fuel. I heat my house with propane. The electricity when I turn on the lights is generated by coal sources. And I just think we need to start changing our direction to give people more options. One of the ways that I think we can do it at the federal level is to provide some incentives for the production of vegetable oils, otherwise known as biodiesel. To provide some incentives for cellulosic ethanol and some research dollars to develop the kind of methods we need to be able to do that in a cost-effective way. And really push forward with renewable portfolio standards that will allow for more wind energy and more renewable energy in the portfolios of our electricity suppliers. So I really think that we have tremendous opportunity at this point in time. I think that agriculture can play a huge role, and I think in the end it will help solve the not only our dependence on foreign oil and fossil fuel oil, but it'll also help solve the climate change issue.
It's also important to remember, as we focus on personal, community, and state things, that the global warming crisis is a global problem and it requires a global solution. The American people have to get their government involved. Once we have an awareness of the problem, we just need to get aroused enough to take the strong action to address it. And I think that that's an opportunity for us to show our greatness as a culture.
Right now there's still time, but not a lot of it.
There's no room to give up. We owe it to the folks who come after us. Somebody's got to be able to stand in this spot when I'm dust and look around and say, people who had this place before did a nice job.
We don't have to have hope. We have to have a sense of adventure and a sense of possibility. A sense of outrage would be good.
So much labor with not one singular gram of tangible difference. It is not a giving up or even a wearing thin, but instead a reconstituting of desire. In some cases, fire is too quick an instrument for the work that needs to be done. In some instances, ice is the tool that is called for, the ice of decades or the ice of centuries. If you cannot, even in your best efforts, attain speed, then perhaps you can gain solace from images and models of power, the great sheets of ice that sculpted many of the wild places we find ourselves fighting for, the great masses of snow and ice that scribed their direction into every ravine and peak and cirque of these stony landscapes, and which laid to level the resistant landforms, entire mountain ranges of obstacles.
Got some serious problems I thought you knew. Call my politician and tell him my point of view. Said we got war, famine, death, and disease, crisis that is driving us to our knees. Here's what my politician told me that we're gonna do. He said, I think we better study that a little bit more. Form a committee, put an issue out on the floor. Call it Senate Bill number 7, tell all the people it was meant
heaven and spend another year while we study it a little bit more. Investigating team gonna study it a little bit more. They'll read all the specs and tell us that it's up to score. They'll hand us a pacifying line, say everything is a-going fine, and spend another year and study it a little bit more. Special prosecutor to be on the scene. He'll solve the puzzle and tell us what it really means. He'll write a 500-page report, get the whole damn thing thrown out of court, and spend another year and study it a little bit more. Then we'll initiate a survey review. Tell us all about the things we already knew. We'll analyze cause and effect and blame it all on a religious sect, and spend another year while we study it a little bit more. Spend another year, study it a little bit more. Yeah, we'll spend another year and study it a little bit more. Ain't nothing else left to say, 'cause we're all gonna forget about it anyway, while we spend another year and study it a little bit